This year marks the 10th anniversary of the Game Awards. The Game Awards, or the Keigleys if you'd rather, are very easy to make fun of, and anytime they get brought up, people will find plenty of valid things to mock. They are incredibly commercial, featuring a staggering number of ads throughout. The categories and nominees themselves are often confusing or muddled. They are often tough to watch, with unfunny jokes, celebrity presenters who don't want to be there, and in one case, a failure of security resulting in the Game of the Year's acceptance speech, including a shout-out to this guy's rabbi, Bill Clinton. Last year in particular felt like a breaking point for opinion on the Game Awards. Not that the public's opinion was ever positive, exactly, but to many people, last year's show felt so egregiously bad and commercial that it disrespected the very people it was supposed to be honoring. After the 2023 awards, I saw a lot of people saying that the Game Awards don't matter, that they're a sham, and that people should just stop caring about them altogether. I don't agree. The Game Awards are certainly bad in many ways, but that's not a reason to stop caring about them. The most recent Game Awards, at least according to their self-reported numbers, had 118 million viewers. For comparison, it's hard to find numbers on how many live viewers the DICE Awards had, but the official archive of the most recent DICE Awards has 4.5k views on the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences YouTube channel, and that channel has fewer subscribers than I do. I am not a popular YouTuber. Whether we like to admit it or not, a lot of people watch the Game Awards, a lot of people talk about the Game Awards, a lot of people get angry about the Game Awards, and a lot of people care about the Game Awards. They wouldn't make for such easy rage bait if people didn't care about them. I think that the Game Awards, whatever problems they may have, matter because people care about them. To dismiss them as meaningless or to simply make fun of them for being cringe is to let them off scot-free for the mistakes they are making. So you know what? I do care about the Game Awards. I do think they matter. I think we should take them seriously and be critical of what they are doing wrong. So instead of angrily yelling at the screen, today I want to try to answer a simple question. Why are the Game Awards like that? Why are the categories so confusing? Why do the winners sometimes feel strange? And why are they so commercial? And dare I even ask, are there things which the Game Awards do right? The Game Awards are what we have, and I don't have millions of dollars to start a competing awards show, so the best I can do is try to communicate why and how I think they can and should be better. Part 1. How are the winners selected? I think it's best to begin by looking at what the actual process of winning a Game Award is, because that tells us what kind of award show it is, and what our expectations should be. The Game Awards really wants to present itself as the Oscars of video games, the big, prestigious award show that is the end-all be-all of industry accolades, but in terms of how they're selected, the two shows couldn't be more different. The Oscars are actually called the Academy Awards, and the reason for that is because the winners are selected by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. To translate that for people who don't speak awards shows, the voters for the Oscars are people who are invited to join the Academy based on their accomplishments or by being sponsored by existing members. It's not enough to just be in a movie or work on a movie, it is by invitation only. The criteria are publicly available, but they're very nebulous. For example, in order to be eligible for the actors branch, you must have a minimum of 3 theatrical feature film credits, in all of which the roles played were scripted roles, one of which was released in the past 5 years, and all of which are of a caliber that reflect the high standards of the Academy. Or you need to have been nominated for an Academy Award in one of the acting categories, or you need to be recognized by the Actors Branch Executive Committee for having achieved some outstanding accomplishment that doesn't fit the first 2 criteria. What is a film that reflects the high standards of the Academy, you might ask? Well, that's up to the discretion of the Academy, and the Academy is not that big. As of 2022, the number of voters stood at just under 10,000, which is why it's possible and fairly easy to lobby for an award. The biggest condemnation of the Oscars as an award is that if you want to win an Oscar, you don't do it by making the best movie possible. You do it by making the movie that those select 9,000-something people are most likely to enjoy. On paper. You can also have a whole conversation about how most of the people voting on the Oscars haven't actually seen the movies they're voting on, and that's a really valid point. I am not going to defend the integrity of the Oscars or the Academy as an institution. They have no integrity to defend. The equivalent to this award in the games industry is not the Game Awards, it's the DICE Awards. The DICE Awards are voted on by members of the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, the video game industry equivalent to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Now, unlike the film equivalent, you can freely apply to the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences on their website, and the criteria here are very clear. They read, requires 2 credits on 2 shipped titles or 2 years experience working for a game developer or publisher with commercially available titles. The DICE Awards have around 33,000 voting members, more than 3 times the size of the voting membership of the Oscars. So, how are the Game Awards selected? Well, we can go to their website and see what the process is. First, the nominees. The nominations are made by a jury of gaming publications from around the world. You can see exactly which publications are on this jury here. Link in the description. GameSpot, Giant Bomb, Eurogamer, GamesRadar, Famitsu, Dengeki Online. There are a lot of different outlets on this jury, including ones from outside of the English-speaking world. Each outlet submits 5 games for each category, and the 5 games, or 6 in the event of a tie, which appear the most often, make the cut as nominees. Once the nominations are made, there is a public vote available on the Game Awards website. However, this is crucial, the actual winners selected are weighted between votes of the public and votes from that same jury, and the public votes count for only 10% of the results, with the jury's vote making up 90% of it. In the FAQ, in response to why the final results aren't strictly based on the public vote, the website states, creating a 100% fan vote presents several challenges. First, given that some games are exclusive to one platform, a public vote puts single-platform games at an inherent disadvantage over multi-platform titles. In addition, it is important that winners cannot be socially engineered in any way. We find that a blended vote is the most credible and authentic way to select winners. This is all public knowledge, so they aren't exactly keeping how the awards are structured secret, but you have to know to look for what the award process is, or else be told by someone what it is. And to be totally clear, I don't have an issue with the Game Awards being selected by critics. That's perfectly fine. A public vote would be far too easy to manipulate. I only think it is misleading how they present the show. I have watched, I believe, every single Game Awards ceremony except for the 2021 live as they were airing, and I definitely think they present it as a publicly voted award. In reality, the award is primarily decided by the same critics who submit the nominees. What this process actually results in, to compare it once again to film, is more like the Golden Globes than the Oscars. The Golden Globes are an award for both film and television organized and voted on by journalists who cover film and television, rather than the people who work in the field itself. It's no mystery why the Game Awards would want to evoke the Oscars and not the Golden Globes. One award is viewed as far less prestigious than the other. In terms of representing the games people are actually playing, and the games that actually generate conversation in a given year, I do think the Game Awards have gotten it right, at least with the nominations for Game of the Year, a lot more than they've gotten it wrong. Let's compare the history of the past 5 years of these awards with each other, and with a third truly publicly voted award, the Steam Awards, to see how much they overlap. This won't map perfectly because the Steam Awards obviously only extend to games released on Steam, so I'll try to shout out when a game that wins another award wouldn't have been eligible for the Steam Award, just to keep that in mind. 2023. The Game Award goes to Baldur's Gate 3, and the DICE Award goes to Baldur's Gate 3. The Steam Award also goes to Baldur's Gate 3. 2022. The Game Award goes to Elden Ring, and the DICE Award goes to Elden Ring. The Steam Award goes to also Elden Ring. 2021, the Game Award goes to It Takes Two, and the DICE Award also goes to It Takes Two. This year is an anomaly when it comes to the Steam Award, because it's the only year we're looking at where the winner of the other awards, It Takes Two, was eligible for a Steam Award and didn't even end up nominated. But Resident Evil 8, which did win the Steam Award, was also nominated for the Game Award. It's not until 2020 that the Game Award and the DICE Award actually go to different games, with The Last of Us Part 2 winning the Game Award and Hades taking the DICE Award. And even then, both games were nominated for both awards. On the other hand, Red Dead Redemption 2 won the Steam Award, but it had already been recognized at the other shows 2 years earlier when it was released on consoles. Hades was still nominated for the Steam Award, and The Last of Us Part 2 wouldn't have been eligible. In 2019, the first year Steam did a Game of the Year category, Sekiro took the Steam Award, Sekiro took the Game Award, and the DICE Award went to Untitled Goose Game, which was not nominated for the Game Award and would not have been eligible for a Steam Award, as it was an Epic Game Store exclusive at the time. The reason I'm harping on this is to point out that for all of the accusations and conspiracies of the Game Awards being paid off and only existing to shill for companies, the games which most gamers seem to feel the most passionate about tend to end up on the list more often than not, and expensive games pushed by big publishers that end up being unpopular get left off the list. I feel like people make the integrity of these awards out to be far worse than they really are. If these really were the shill awards, don't you think Dragon Age 4 would have been nominated this year, or Starfield last year? Not to comment on the quality of those games at all, I haven't played Dragon Age 4, and Starfield... Well, not to comment on Dragon Age's quality, but those games are both backed by some of the biggest publishers in the industry, and yet Balatro made it onto the Game of the Year list, and Dragon Age 4 didn't. And, to further emphasize the point, the much maligned, at the time, Cyberpunk 2077 did end up getting nominated for the Game of the Year award in the Steam Awards 2021, and did not end up nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards or the DICE Awards. I think that speaks for itself. I'm not saying I think any of these awards always get it right. For example, I wouldn't have given Game of the Year 2018 to God of War over Red Dead Redemption 2, not to mention Hitman 2, which I don't know if you've heard, but I quite liked, and which wasn't even nominated. But these aren't my awards, and I think as a whole, they do an okay job of representing what games people were paying attention to and actually playing in a given year. Better than most film awards. There are problems to be found with every possible awards structure. There are arguments to be made against every possible award structure. The Oscars are too exclusive and therefore not representative of the art form as a whole. The Golden Globes are representative of the kind of movies, I say this lovingly, film snobs like, not what your average film goer is going to enjoy. The People's Choice Awards are too inclusive, and therefore the winner always ends up being the most broadly palatable movie, not the one that anyone in particular thinks is the actual best movie. But that's why we have a bunch of different award shows awarding different things. No one award is perfect, so we have more than one award. The fact that the Game Awards and the DICE Awards aren't just a long list of games no one has ever heard of each year, and often tend to be mostly popular games that have been talked about all year long, actually shows pretty directly that the tastes of the people making games, and the people writing about games, and the people playing games are not actually very far apart at all, especially when compared to film. Part 2. The categories are bad. An issue that's getting brought up this year a lot is the vagueness of the categories and what qualifies for what. This has come up this year because Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree was nominated for Best Game, which a lot of people have a problem with because it's not a game, it's an expansion pack to an existing game. Because it's about Game of the Year, the big award, this is the loudest the discourse about this subject has been, but this has come up in previous years too. Last year, there was a controversy over Dave the Diver, which was nominated for Best Indie Game. The problem being, Dave the Diver is by no definition of the word indie. It's not independent. It's published by Nexon and created by a wholly owned subsidiary of Nexon. Genshin Impact was nominated for Best Mobile Game in 2020, lost to Among Us, and was then nominated again and won in 2021, despite not being released that year. It was then nominated a third time in 2022. So why does this keep happening? Why are the nominees for these categories so often so weird? Well, the Game Awards official FAQ on their website says the following. How are live service games handled? The Game Awards recognizes that many games are ongoing services that evolve over time with new content, features, and improvements. Games released in previous years are eligible in all award categories, so long as the jury feels their inclusion is merited due to new content, improvements, or service updates. Are DLCs, expansion packs, and remakes/remasters eligible? The Game Awards aims to recognize the best creative and technical work each year, irrespective of the format of that content's release. Expansion packs, new game seasons, DLCs, remakes and remasters are eligible in all categories, if the jury deems the new creative and technical work to be worthy of a nomination. Factors such as the newness of the content and its price/value should be taken into consideration. So, realistically, there is no restriction placed that requires games to have been released that year in order to be nominated. There is also no restriction whatsoever that it actually has to be a game to be nominated for Game of the Year. A patch is technically eligible to be nominated for Game of the Year. Genuinely, I am asking, what is the point of the Best Ongoing Game category if games can be nominated in the other categories as well for those same ongoing content updates? There's also the problem of how weirdly ambiguous the categories are. Look at this year's Best Action-Adventure Game nominees. Astrobot, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Silent Hill 2, Star Wars Outlaws, and The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Genre awards are, in my opinion, a bad fit for these kinds of collectively voted awards. Video game genres are really nebulous, even more so than film, because video game genres are typically, with the exception of horror games, based on what you are doing and not the emotion they are trying to evoke. That makes them different from every other art form's genre classifications. The action-adventure category, for example, reads, for the best action-adventure game combining combat with traversal and puzzle solving. That is extremely broad. One person might hear that and think of a 3D platformer like Astrobot, another might think that refers to Silent Hill 2, a game where you're exploring a town and fighting dangerous and scary enemies. These two people might work at completely different publications, both of which are on the jury, and might think their selections for that genre make perfect sense, but they're not even really talking about the same thing. Unless the people voting are all in the same room and discussing what their definitions are, I think genre categories are simply too broad. I think the Dave the Diver thing was just a mistake by the jury. I think because it has a simple art style and is a relatively small-scale game, the people making nominations picked it without realizing who actually made it. Which is fine, I'm not angry at any individual person on the jury for not knowing who made Dave the Diver. The problem is that the Game Awards apparently don't have any sort of veto system to reject nominees who don't fit a category criteria, or indeed, strict enough criteria at all. Let's contrast this with the Oscars, since that is what the Game Awards clearly wants to be perceived as. If you go to the Oscars website, you can find for every single award very specific criteria for eligibility. Like, let's look at animated feature film. It's a 3-page document, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, obviously, but it begins, an animated film is defined as a motion picture in which movement and characters' performances are created using a frame-by-frame technique, and usually falls into one of two general fields of animation, narrative or abstract. Some of the techniques of animating films include, but are not limited to, hand-drawn animation, computer animation, stop-motion, clay animation, pixelation, cutout animation, pin screen, camera multiple-pass imagery, kaleidoscopic effects created frame-by-frame, and drawing on the film frame itself. Motion capture and real-time puppetry are not by themselves animation techniques. An animated short film has a running time of 40 minutes or less, an animated feature film has a running time of more than 40 minutes. In an animated film, animation must figure in no less than 75% of the picture's running time. In addition, a narrative animated film must have a significant number of the major characters animated. If the picture is created in a cinematic style that could be mistaken for live action, the filmmakers must also submit information supporting how and why the picture is substantially a work of animation rather than live action. That is very clear. Yes, there is some amount of ambiguity. For example, does the 2019 remake of The Lion King count as an animated film since it's designed to look photorealistic? But at the very least, you can tell they've made an attempt to clearly define what the category means, and have even mentioned edge cases at the end of the definition. I'm not a member of the Academy, obviously. All of this information is publicly available if you think to look. If you're ever confused why someone got nominated for Best Supporting Actress instead of just Best Actress, all you have to do is look and you can learn why. They got more nominations in the supporting category than the lead category, so the nomination only goes to that category because you aren't allowed to be nominated in both categories for the same performance. Simple. Clear. The Oscars also, I think wisely, eschews genre categories entirely. Although, to be fair, the Golden Globes does not, but I would say they have the exact same ambiguity problem as the Game Awards, albeit to a lesser extent, which is how you get some very strange choices, like The Martian winning Best Musical or Comedy in 2015. And then you have the vagueness of a category like Games for Impact, a completely meaningless phrase that really just means vaguely socially conscious indie game that we don't think would have been nominated anywhere else. How do you measure that? Ah, yes, Life is Strange Double Exposure and Hellblade 2 both have a social message, but which one has the most social message? And I mean, it's just games they didn't think would get nominated somewhere else. Disco Elysium, which won Best Narrative, didn't get nominated for Games for Impact the year it came out, and that game turns people into communists. This feels fundamental to me if you're going to organize an awards show. They take the criteria for their awards seriously. They take the definitions of their awards seriously. They take their awards seriously. If you are running any kind of award, then you have to do that. You have to care about splitting hairs on definitions of what you're actually even talking about, because if you don't, what's the point? What are we actually saying a game did well? To me, this is where the validity of the awards themselves starts to fall apart, because an award can only be as valuable as what it is being awarded for. Without a narrow criteria for what each category means, we might as well just be pinning a big blue ribbon to each game that says, "Good job." Good job for what? I don't care about any of these weird picks in particular. Any one of these things on their own, Shadow of the Erdtree getting nominated for Game of the Year, Genshin getting nominated for Best Mobile Game 3 years in a row, the continued weirdness of the categories, Nexon being nominated for an Indie Award, in a vacuum, each of these things are whatever. But if you look at this more broadly, I think it shows that there is a problem overall. That's not even to get into the philosophical problems with some of these categories. Most of all, most anticipated game? Ugh. You might as well just call it best marketing department. There is some value in knowing what games are grabbing people's attention before they are released, but the place for that should, in my opinion, be an IGN poll or something, not an event that wants to be taken seriously as a prestigious award ceremony. These categories need to be gutted. They don't make sense. If these awards are to be taken seriously, I think the Game Awards really needs to rethink its categories entirely and have more strict definitions for them. And some sort of veto system if something makes it into a category it clearly shouldn't have. Part 3. The Unbearable Cringe of the Game Awards. Brought to you by the Schick Hydrobot. So far, I have been talking about the awards themselves, how they are structured, how they are voted on, and whether they are actually any good at representing the landscape of gaming overall or not. But that's not what the experience of watching the Game Awards is at all, now is it? It would be disingenuous to say that the experience of watching the Game Awards has much at all to do with the awards given out themselves. The Game Awards are embarrassing. The jokes are painfully unfunny, the presenters are often uncharismatic, the celebrities look like they want to be anywhere else, and the advertising is some next level too on the nose for satire stuff. Really, the experience of watching the Game Awards is best encapsulated by the Schick Hydrobot.
Hydrobot, taking it to the next level, that was sick! You think you can go for a few more rounds? We'll see in a little bit, but for now, let's head back to the Game Awards. Hydrobot, at it again! Enjoy the rest of the Game Awards, everyone. We gotta go. Hydrobot is gonna school me on how to protect my skin from irritation.
I am obsessed with the Schick Hydrobot. This clip is just astounding. Everything about it. The charisma black hole of the man standing alongside the Hydrobot, the lines being read in the cadence of a joke without the content, the existence of the Hydrobot itself and its presence at what's meant to be a serious ceremony for grown-ups and not, the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards. I want to be a bit gracious here when I talk about how embarrassing the Game Awards often are, however. It is worth remembering that we, the internet audience, are not exactly the primary target for the show. They are a live stage event, and being in a live audience has a completely different energy from watching something on the internet. There are jokes that play to a live audience, or at least are inoffensive to a live audience, that simply don't play to people sitting in front of a computer monitor because of the social conditions of being surrounded by other people. It's no different from how you might make a joke to your friends and everyone laughs, but then if you wrote that same joke in a Reddit comment or a forum post, everyone would roll their eyes. So, last year, 2023, Gonzo talking about how sexy chickens are on stage, that feels like the exact same brand of unfunny, painful, wouldn't this be cute banter you get at the Oscars all the time. No notes. It's fine. And the live element means some things about the show which go wrong are legitimately out of the control of the people organizing the show. People showing up drunk? I suspect I once watched a certain someone host the Oscars while high, so I'm not going to hold that against the Keigleys.
Look. Okay, can you swear here? Can you swear? Okay. Fuck the Oscars, you know? Fuck the Oscars!
And say what you will about the kid who shouted out his Rabbi Bill Clinton, he didn't slap anyone in the face. There are even some things about the Game Awards that I think they do better than the Oscars. For example, the problem of the host. It's no secret that in recent years, the Oscars have been scrambling to find a palatable host each year, and often fail to find one that's even remotely watchable. Part of the reason I think the hosts of the Oscars are often so painful to watch is because hosting is an entirely different skill from acting, and it takes years of practice to get good at it. There's a reason that people tended to like the years Billy Crystal hosted. He hosted it 9 times, and before that he had hosted SNL twice and was a cast member on SNL. And before that he had experience as a stand-up comedian, which is a much more transferable skill to hosting than scripted roles are. Compare that to a really rotten year of hosting, like when Anne Hathaway and James Franco did it. Anne Hathaway and James Franco were both known primarily for scripted roles in front of the camera, with relatively little experience hosting or interacting with an audience, and they both, especially Franco, turned out extremely wooden and painfully unfunny performances as a result. Because the Oscars switch out their host every year, the quality of that hosting, and therefore the quality of the show itself, varies wildly. The Game Awards, by contrast, have only ever had one primary host, Geoff Keighley, the show's creator, and one supporting host, Sydney Goodman. I personally think Keighley is a pretty solid host. He's comfortable talking to a camera and to a live audience, and generally maintains an appropriate level of professionalism during the show. Even if you hate Keighley, though, you have to agree that this has resulted in a very consistent quality of hosting throughout the show's history. You might want to say that hosting is consistently bad if you hate Keighley, but that is still consistent. The host is the backbone of the entire show. To some extent, a show like this is its host, and so I think it's a good thing that the Game Awards, at least in this regard, have a consistent identity. In a theoretical world where the Game Awards keeps running for another 80 or 90 years like the Oscars has, I would hope that when Keighley ages out of the role, they take this same approach of finding a consistent host for the show, because I think it's a good choice. Another part of the Game Awards that's so uncomfortable to watch are the celebrities they pull from outside the games industry every year. Not all of them, necessarily. One of my all-time favorite moments at the Game Awards was when Christopher Judge, who plays Kratos in the God of War revival games, got up on stage alongside Sonny Suljic, who played Boy, to present an award in 2018. The Game Awards is not a show you watch to see people show off their fashion game, and like I said before, most of the non-Keighley presenters tend to be charisma black holes, so to watch Teal'c walk up on stage looking iconic and manage to have a legitimately funny and charming moment, I love this. This is great.
And the Game Award goes to... Read it, boy.
The award goes to Ninja.
But Chris Judge was associated with games at that point. He'd been in one of the biggest games of the year, and even had his performance nominated for one of the awards at that very show. He had clearly come to care about games at this point. What I'm talking about here are the celebrities who clearly do not want to be there and who have no meaningful established connection to gaming, like Matthew McConaughey coming out and saying, "Pew, pew, pew." Or Michelle Rodriguez failing to pretend to be excited to show the trailer for a garbage Fast and Furious game to the world.
I'm excited for that one.
Or Anthony Mackie failing to have a Keanu-style "you're beautiful" moment.
You look great. You guys see this section right here? You guys look great. Keep it going, baby. I don't trust this dude, but y'all look great. Don't you yell at me. I love you more. I love you! What is wrong with y'all?
This all reeks of desperation. Look, Ma, video games aren't just for kids anymore. Matthew McConaughey is in one, and he won an Oscar. It is hard to watch. I have looked at more footage of the Game Awards the past few weeks while working on this video than anyone should, and it turns out at a certain point the human body just starts to reject it. For me, it was that clip of McConaughey saying, "Pew, pew, pew," that broke me a little bit. They need to be more selective with the celebrities they invite to this show, because there are plenty of celebrities out there who either have connections to the games industry or more generally care about gaming. For example, last year, Timothée Chalamet handed out the Game of the Year award, and he did a solid job presenting. Professional, engaged, didn't look like he was crawling out of his skin trying to escape the room. Turns out Timothée Chalamet ran a YouTube channel about modded Xbox 360 controllers before he was famous, so he actually cares about games. That said, I do think it would have been more appropriate to have an industry peer like Ed Boon, who presented the Narrative Award that night, or an actor who's associated with video games like Matthew Mercer, who presented a trailer that night, giving out what the show is presenting as the industry's highest honor instead. They need to hold their presenters to a higher standard. They need to find people who look like they want to be there, because bringing people like this on stage, even just to show off a trailer, cheapens the awards themselves. If the Game Awards presenters are not taking themselves seriously, then that says the award itself should not be taken seriously. Shout out to Idris Elba for not showing up to an awards show he didn't care about last year. That was honestly the most respectful thing he could have done. The number one thing that people really complain about, justifiably, that makes the Game Awards a special kind of hell distinct from the Oscars, is the level of advertisement which they contain. There is so much advertising at the Game Awards each year. So much. Any criticism you can make of the Game Awards can always be countered with, but they're so much better than the Spike VGAs were. This is a tough point to counter because it's absolutely right. Whatever problems the Game Awards might have, the Spike VGAs were worse in every conceivable way. But come on, I'd rather be shot than burned alive. That doesn't mean I like either option. The VGAs were also produced by Geoff Keighley and ran from 2003 to 2013. When Spike TV decided not to continue their show, Geoff Keighley secured funding for a new version of it, divorced from the Spike TV branding. I have tried to write this script around Geoff Keighley as much as possible, because I don't like projecting thoughts and opinions onto people I've never met, but that's proved very hard, because for all intents and purposes, Geoff Keighley is the Game Awards. He's the creator of the show, and the public face of the show. In 2012, 2 years before the Game Awards started, when Keighley was still deep in the Spike VGA's minds, he gave an interview at Comic-Con with LevelSave.com. That interview looked like this. If there is one thing you know Geoff Keighley from, it is probably the Game Awards. If there's a second thing you know Geoff Keighley from, it is probably this image, which led to him being dubbed the Doritos Pope or the Doritos King. In the interview, Geoff Keighley is asked about the promotion he's sitting in front of, Double XP and Halo 4 for drinking Mountain Dew and eating Doritos, and whether he thinks it's a good thing that food companies have started doing this kind of promotion where you get benefits in a game for eating their products. In response, he says this.
Well, I look at it from a macro level in that, for a long time, movies have always had all these promotional partners tied to their releases, and I think games haven't. And, one of the things that I've always believed in is that games need to become even more mainstream. I mean, guys like you and I play them, but still, the mass acceptance of how big gaming is not fully appreciated. And one conduit to sort of reach that level of sort of attention is by brand partnerships. And Mountain Dew is...
This interview was politicized a lot circa Gamergate, because of course it was, but I'm not interested in doing that today. All I want to point out is that it's interesting to hear Keighley say, just a couple of years before creating what would go on to become the most popular award in the history of video games, that he sees brand deals as legitimizing the medium. Because if you take him at face value, if you believe that he believes what he's saying, then doesn't that just explain so much about the Game Awards? I kind of get where he's coming from here. Film and advertisement have always gone hand in hand. In fact, the very first movie to ever win Best Picture, then called Outstanding Picture, the silent film Wings, featured several prominent shots of Hershey's chocolate bars. This was in 1929. But it's not like video games have actually historically been missing product placement. Just to name a few examples from before Keighley posed with Doritos and Mountain Dew in 2012, you have Chex Quest as an officially licensed total conversion mod of Doom, Alan Wake using Energizer brand batteries to power his flashlight while talking on a Verizon wireless brand phone, even Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign paying for billboard real estate in Burnout Paradise. So no, suffice to say, I don't personally think the thing holding video games back from being treated seriously and being fully mainstream in 2012 was that there weren't enough commercials in them. I just believe Geoff Keighley when he says he thinks that. In terms of presentation, the Game Awards have less in common with the Oscars or the Golden Globes, and more in common with the Super Bowl. How many times have you heard someone say they watched the Super Bowl for the commercials? And how many times have you heard someone say they watched the Game Awards for the world premieres? There are really three kinds of advertisements at the Game Awards. There are the full-on commercials, like showing anti-smoking PSAs or ads for the concept of the Nintendo Switch existing. On their own, these don't bother me at all. They're just commercials while watching a live event. Then there are the sponsored segments, or ad reads. This is when Geoff Keighley looks into the camera with cold, dead eyes and says, "The Game Awards are brought to you by Genshin Impact. Go download Genshin Impact right now and get 10 free pulls, or else I'll come to your house and personally break your kneecaps." I find these harder to defend because the product itself, the show, is becoming an advertisement, which, when you consider the number of other advertisements already present in the show, adds to the overall feeling of cheapness and lack of prestige. You might be saying, but don't the Oscars do that too? Didn't Ellen take a selfie one year to advertise a phone? And the answer is, yes, they do, and it's bad, and makes the show feel cheaper and less prestigious there too. Do not let your takeaway from this video be that the Oscars are good.
Fuck the Oscars, you know?
And then, of course, there are the world premieres. The Game Awards is not just viewed as an awards show. It's also viewed by a lot of its audience as a sort of E3.5 that comes around every year on the opposite end of the calendar. It's a big event where you might see the next big game get announced. Sekiro first got teased there, Armored Core 6 got announced there, Hideo Kojima announced a new horror game there last year. If you care about games in the specific way people like me do, you're going to watch the Game Awards, because Bloodborne 2 might get announced, and you have to be there if it is. I do not claim to be a role model. I find it difficult to talk about the world premieres without letting my bias get in the way, because to be totally honest, if they were gone, I would be sad to see them go. They are one of the aspects of this show which I personally enjoy. I have a lot of fun seeing what gets announced each year, and talking about the announcements with friends, and watching people speculate about what's going to get unveiled. This is the year for Silksong, guys. I'm calling it now. For better or worse, announcements have been a big part of the games industry for as long as I've been alive, in a way that's only really emulated in film by, for example, Disney bringing Robert Downey Jr. on stage to announce that he's Dr. Doom now for some reason. World premieres, and to some extent hype culture, are an indelible part of gaming culture. So if you're going to make a celebration of games, in my opinion, there are worse ways of going about it than getting people excited for games coming in the future. You could absolutely make the same argument against these world premieres that I made against the most anticipated category earlier, that it makes the show a celebration of marketing rather than a celebration of art. Personally, I think there is a distinction between showing a trailer for an upcoming game and literally giving a game's marketing an award. I am not here to say, oh, the Game Awards is bad because of capitalism. I don't have a problem with the Game Awards having brand deals and trailers and giveaways, and I don't have a problem with the people organizing an event making money off of that event. I mean, unless you have YouTube Premium, you'll be seeing commercials during this very video, so I'm not hypocritical enough to tisk at the Game Awards for making advertising money. The problem with the advertising in the Game Awards is the ratio. People often joke that the Game Awards are 90% ads and 10% show, But have you ever wondered how much of the Game Awards actually involves the awards? Well, it's hard to say. I mean, the only way to try to figure that out would be to sit down, measure how much time is spent on the actual show and how much time is spent on advertisements, and then calculate it yourself, which would be really tedious and time-consuming. Here is my math, calculated based on the official archive of the Game Awards 2023 on their site. I will link PDFs containing exactly how I calculated this in the description. I am being as transparent as possible with this because I did this myself. I checked my numbers like 3 times, but I am human, and I did all of this while I had a cold. So, you can go check my math if you'd like to. All of these start and stop times are based on the timestamps where I clicked pause, so these are my estimates. Do not treat these numbers like gospel. I really did try to err in the Game Awards' favor so that it did not seem like I was juicing the numbers to make my point. In the runtime I considered, which was 3 hours, 1 minute, and 45 seconds, or 10,905 total seconds, I found that 3,515 seconds of the show were meaningful show content, which means approximately 32.22% of the show is actual show. That includes the introduction, nominees being read out, awards being given out, speeches, skits and banter, and live musical performances. The remaining 7,390 seconds of runtime, or approximately 67.78% of the show, was some form of advertisement. That includes world premiere trailers, commercials, introducing celebrities who are only there to show a game, ad reads, Keighley saying, "We've got another world premiere coming up, so be sure to stay tuned," and so on and so forth. Let me restate that. Just over 2/3 of the show is some form of advertisement. I don't need the commercials to go away entirely. I don't need the world premieres to go away entirely. And I don't even need the bits where Geoff Keighley barrels the camera and tells me to buy a second Steam Deck to go away entirely. But 2/3 of the show? When people are being rushed off stage after a mere 30 seconds during their acceptance speeches? That is indefensible. This overwhelming amount of marketing, these sponsorships and commercials and world premiere trailers, have ironically done a tremendous amount of damage to the Game Awards' own brand. It is seen as everything wrong with the games industry, and the stranglehold which soulless corporations have on it. That's a shame, because I don't think it's hard to see how the Game Awards could be something more. Part 4. Game Awards for Impact. The Game Awards used to do an honorary Industry Icon Award, basically a Lifetime Achievement Award. The first one, awarded in 2014 at the very first show, went to Ken and Roberta Williams, the married couple who founded Sierra Entertainment, which created King's Quest, Gabriel Knight, and even published the original Half-Life. Then it went to Brett Sperry and Lewis Castle, who founded Westwood Studios and created the Command & Conquer series. Then it went to Hideo Kojima, who received the award the very same year he posed for this photo with the Schick Hydrobot. Then to Carol Shaw, a very early female game designer who made games for the Atari 2600, like River Raid. Then, finally, to Greg Thomas, who is one of the founders of Visual Concepts, who have been making sports games since the 90s. And then, they stopped doing the award. They haven't done one since 2018. And that's a shame. Because you watch Ken and Roberta Williams, two of the people who were absolutely foundational to the idea of using games to tell stories, get a chance to be recognized for literally changing an art form. Or you see Carol Shaw, someone who is now considered to have been overshadowed in the male-dominated early industry, and watch her get cheered by an entire theater of people 40 years later. That's what the Game Awards should be. That's what they can be. That is what a celebration of games and the people who make them looks like. You know what my favorite award is every year? Innovation and Accessibility. It's a category which was added in 2020 and which they still give out as of 2024. In 2020, the first Innovation and Accessibility Award went to The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us 2 included a ton of features that made it possible for people who are vision impaired, blind, deaf, hard of hearing, or have motor issues to still experience the game. It's remarkable. In 2021, it went to Forza Horizon 5, which, among other features, included a sign language interpreter for both ASL and BSL, So if you want to turn that on for all of the game's dialogue, you're able to. A wild and I think really cool feature. In 2022, it went to God of War Ragnarok, which, similarly to The Last of Us 2, featured a large range of accessibility options for people with vision, hearing, or motor concerns. Last year, Forza Motorsport took it. They made a racing game that blind people can play, you guys. That's wild. You want to talk about games for impact? That is Games for Impact. That is the Game Awards celebrating something that should absolutely be celebrated. New features that let more people than ever have a chance to play some of the best games of the year. Studios are spending time and money to push forward the technology and systems which we use to play games and make it possible for entirely new groups of people to play those games, and personally, I think knowing they have a chance to get their game advertised in front of 100 million people at the end of the year if they succeed in innovation is a strong incentive that has influenced a lot of these decisions to prioritize accessibility being made. And, to the Game Awards' credit, this year, 2024, they actually improved this category by including an official write-up of the nominees for the first time on their site if you dig around, so you don't need to go research each game individually. If nothing else, I think this category justifies the existence of the show each year. It's a shame then that last year's winner was pushed off to be announced in the pre-show. 2023 felt in many ways like a breaking point. For this section of the video, I'm going to be referencing an article from Eurogamer written by Chris Tapsell called "The Game Awards Will Never Represent Our Industry in the Way It Needs. So what next?" Because I think it's a good summary of why the 2023 show specifically caused so much ire. It goes into much more detail than I will here, so go read it, link in the description. The Game Awards 2023 were not the most embarrassing to watch. That would be 2016. And they were not the most boring to watch. That was probably 2018? The actual awards given out were generally pretty agreeable. Some Spider-Man 2 fans got upset that Baldur's Gate 3 beat it for Game of the Year, and I don't think anyone was expecting Alan Wake 2 to sweep in the way that it did, but that sort of thing is going to happen in literally any awards show. In many ways, to viewers, the 2023 Game Awards were a perfectly average, by-the-numbers show. But if you looked closer beyond the broadcast, there was a different story. Many developers felt there were disrespectful decisions made, which only added to the show feeling less and less like an awards show, and more like an excuse to run commercials. Let me run down some of the major complaints. The Game Awards has a future class group, which they add promising young developers to each year. Oh, excuse me, it's actually the future class brought to you by Old Spice. It's just a list of developers who the Game Awards recognize as the face of the future of the industry, largely focused on highlighting diversity. A few weeks before the event, over half of the group signed an open letter to the Game Awards, essentially asking that presenters be allowed to make statements on the ongoing Gaza crisis on stage, when presenter Meghna Jayanth stepped down after being pressured against making any political statements at a different awards show. Outside the event, there were protests regarding both the SAG-AFTRA strike on video games that had not yet begun, but which had already been authorized, and the waves of layoffs that had started hitting the video game industry and which have only gotten worse this year. On stage, certainly the most noticeable problem with the show to an average viewer, presenters were limited to just 30-second acceptance speeches, presumably as a response to Christopher Judge taking a whopping 7 minutes and 59 seconds for his speech the previous year, the longest speech the show has ever had. While playing people off if their speeches run long is nothing new for award shows, 30 seconds is not a lot of time for people to accept. Even the Oscars give people 45 seconds. And throughout the night, watching incredibly high-profile developers get shooed off stage got more and more uncomfortable. Supposedly, though you can't see it in the broadcast, Sven Vincke and company even got the Wrap It Up message for their Game of the Year acceptance speech at the precise moment Vincke was remembering a member of the team who had passed away less than a month earlier. Oh, and they opened the show with a joke about playing people off if they talked for too long. This was in contrast to the advertisements and announcements within the show, which, as we've already covered, were around 2/3 of the total runtime. Hideo Kojima and Jordan Peele spent 8 minutes and 27 seconds, longer than Judge's speech from the previous year, to announce that they were working on a game. They didn't have anything to show off yet. I don't think the game actually existed yet, but they had no time limit to talk. Maybe you think some of these individual choices are good ones. Maybe you think the amount of advertising allows the Game Awards to be sustainable and even grow year over year. Maybe you think that people need to be limited to short acceptance speech times, so that the show doesn't drag on and on and on. Maybe you think people shouldn't be allowed to make political statements during their acceptance speeches, or when they are presenting awards, because it distracts from what the ceremony is actually supposed to be about. I think there are compelling defenses to be made about each of these points, and many of the other problems I've talked about in this video, individually. The problem, though, is in aggregate. Even if you think each of these decisions, and others which I have talked about over the course of this video, are defensible on their own, it is hard to argue that the Game Awards has become a show which anyone is particularly happy with at this point. If you read that Tapsol article, you can find that he's also included a lot of strongly worded responses from game developers furious at the show and what it's become. And if you look at any conversation about the show online from average viewers, I would describe the sentiment overall as an all-time low. You can't please everyone. But the Game Awards sure seem to be trying, and the result is that they've pleased no one instead. From casual viewers, to the most passionate fans of games, to the very people it's supposed to be celebrating. The only people happy with it at this point are the people paying through the nose for those sponsorships. Is that who this is supposed to be for? Because if it is, then yeah, let's just get rid of the awards, call it Winter Game Fest, and drop the pretense. I don't want that to happen, but that's what it's becoming. At the end of that Eurogamer article I mentioned earlier, Tapsol summarizes the problem perfectly. He writes, "The problem remains the continued urge for relevance, which, much like the desire of a slightly awkward teenager to be considered cool, is, in a way, the cause of the problem itself. The more you try to seem cool, I seem to remember being told, the less cool you look. In the Game Awards case, the more you try to make people take you seriously, the less serious you come across." The problem with the Game Awards, the reason they are like that, is because they come from a place of insecurity. They are stuck in the gaming culture of the 2000s, which craved legitimacy from older institutions. They are a part of a conversation that is largely over about the legitimacy of games as an artistic and commercial medium. Instead of taking it as a given that games are meaningful, that they matter to people, and presenting a show that doesn't need to prove the industry to anyone, the Game Awards do everything they can to desperately grasp at shreds of perceived legitimacy. Every good thing that the Game Awards does feels like it inevitably gets dialed back on in favor of something which will bring more views, and more perceived legitimacy. Why did they get Timothée Chalamet to present Game of the Year in 2023 instead of someone with any real connection to the industry? They got Timothée Chalamet because he's an incredibly popular actor. I might know who Ed Boon is, but I was going to watch the Game Awards either way because I do not value my finite seconds on this earth, so they didn't need to pull me in. And so he got to give out the Narrative Award instead. Some random person who likes video games but probably wouldn't watch an award show about them theoretically hears Timothée Chalamet is going to be presenting and goes, "Oh, maybe I will give that a watch after all." Why is there such an insane amount of advertising? Because if Schick is vouching for this event, it must be legitimate. Because look at how fancy and expensive the show can look now. Because the more advertising dollars are clearly being thrown at the show, the more money it makes, and therefore the more legitimate it is, right? Presenting the show as a publicly voted award when it's actually primarily decided by a select group of journalists makes people more likely to feel invested in their picks winning, and therefore more likely to watch the show. They run people off the stage after just 30 seconds because if they go too long, people might tune out and go to bed, even though, unlike the Oscars, the Game Awards are not a televised event. They can go as long as they want to. I doubt the Peacock Theater has another group coming through that night. The categories being as broad as possible means that the most games can be nominated for the most categories, which means the most people might end up watching to see if their pet game wins something. And yeah, they don't want anyone making political statements because it might alienate some portion of the audience. Make no mistake, this strategy has worked for the Game Awards. If you look at their viewership year over year, it has expanded at an astonishing rate. from 1.9 million viewers in 2014 to 11.5 million viewers by 2017 to 49 million by 2019 to 83 million in 2020 to 118 million in 2024. So, you know, maybe Keighley's right. Maybe all of these brand deals and commercials have made the Game Awards a part of the cultural consciousness. But that place it's found in the cultural consciousness is that of a laughingstock. I don't think the Game Awards needs to literally remove all of their advertising to be a respectable show, but they need to right the ship and cut back on it and actually let people accept the awards. To be honest, I think the world premieres would pull more viewers if there were fewer of them, but less of them felt like complete fluff or reiterating things we already know about games that have already been announced. A show with 5 great announcements is more memorable than a show with 5 great announcements and 10 boring ones. I think Geoff Keighley cares about games. I don't know him personally, so I don't want to sit here and pseudo-psychoanalyze him, but I don't think the Game Awards are actually just a way for Geoff Keighley to make $1 billion. Because according to his Wikipedia page, he's the son of 2 of the executives at IMAX, so if all he wanted was to make $1 billion, I have to imagine the full Nepo Baby lifestyle would have been an easier route to that than becoming a damned games journalist. I think Geoff Keighley wants to see video games elevated to new artistic and, yes, commercial heights. In many ways, I respect Geoff Keighley. If you look at Keighley's old articles like The Final Hours of Half-Life, you can feel the passion for the medium and the business behind it. When Geoff Keighley says he wants to celebrate and elevate games and the people who make them, I personally believe him. Your mileage may vary on that, but it is simply the vibe I get from the guy. So whatever criticisms I may have of the show, the last thing I want is for this video to come across as a personal attack on Geoff Keighley. I just think that he and everyone else involved in organizing the show have lost the plot. Every year, I see sentiment that the Game Awards don't matter, and that everyone should stop caring about them. I don't think apathy is a good response to anything, really. I'm never going to respect that response to any problem people have with anything. Not caring about the Game Awards will not make them go away, and will not make them better, and getting angry about them and yelling into the void about how no one cares about the Game Awards, something which is very clearly numerically false, won't either. People only watch them for the trailers, you might say. Really? Then why are there so many damn videos, of which this is one, complaining about the nominees and winners each year? I say again, the Game Awards do not make for such good rage bait if no one cares about the winners. At the beginning of this video, I said I care about the Game Awards because, whether anyone wants to admit it or not, a lot of people watch them, and a lot of people care about them. So just stop caring about them is only a viable option if you don't have a single pragmatic bone in your entire body. The Game Awards are what we've got. They are the most popular video game awards show, easily. People watch them. Companies watch them and know that winning one is free advertisement to over 100 million people. So whether you care about them or not, much like the Oscars, they do matter. They can make careers, and they most definitely have influence on the industry. The only path forward for the Game Awards, then, is to be critical of them. It is to take them seriously and demand that they take themselves seriously. Because I believe the Game Awards can be something better, and I think the people making games deserve that. If you're still watching this, I want to thank you for sticking through this weird video and humoring one of my hyperfixations. This is very different from the kind of video I usually make on this channel, but you know, sometimes my brain has an itch and this is the only way to scratch it. I'm also sorry if I sound like hell warmed over in this video. I'm sick as a dog when I'm recording it. I should not be doing this right now, but time waits for no man, and there's not much point in releasing a video about the Game Awards in January. If this is your first time coming to this channel, yada yada yada, like, comment, subscribe, you've watched a YouTube video before. If I hit $1 million a month on Patreon, I'll start a new awards show to compete with the Keighleys. I'm only at $100 a month right now, but I think we can make the stretch goal. Speaking of, I want to give a special thank you to my patrons and YouTube channel members who have pledged $5 or above per month to help me defeat Geoff Keighley in Mortal Kombat. Actually, I'm not very good at fighting games. Geoff Keighley could definitely beat me at Mortal Kombat. The Smallest Church in Wienerville, Ghassan Abunura, Patrizia Frabetti, Sninkelberg, Taylor Blair, Frondi, Yo-Yo Jojo Mojo, Tsai Voafehi, Dan Luther, Still Just Cow, Jose Armalas, William, Cabbage, Rekka, Alex Smith, Picayune, Hakan Boyam, Pete Lee, Nittend, Shiny Empty Head, That's All, Alex, Bell Mage, Malachi Murphy, Edward Clayton Andrew, Rules in Place, Mari SQZ, Raxarox, Mikaru X, Unhealthy Caillou, Sir Darkon, and Rachel Aurelia. I'm trying to get a new Hitman video out by the end of the month, so I'm going to go rest up until I don't sound like I'm on the verge of death, and then head back into the YouTube mines. Until next time, you all take care.